Welcome everyone to another podcast of Southern Dirt Motorsports. Today, having me host this, we've got Gary Lowrance to my left and Mike Luna to my right, and we've got a very, very special guest, Mr. Dave Hensley. Dave has been both a racer, he's been both a car builder, he's worked with some of the best out there, and this is an amazing story of racing that Dave has got. And Dave, if you would, where did your racing story actually start? What was the first thing that got you into this sport anyway?
I think I was born with the itch. I don't know where it came from.
We're unique a little bit.
I like to go fast, bicycles, go-karts, running, on foot, whatever.
I've never met anybody yet that could really explain why you do it. You just know you've got to do it.
It was something that I was going to do.
You know,
one way or the other, I was going to make it happen.
You know the risk, but you also know the reward, and there's not another reward like it. But what kind of business that were you in before you started getting attracted to car racing?
I actually started really being interested in dirt car racing around 1963. That's when I saw my first race. So I was 10 years old.
You started about the same time that I did.
Yes.
And well, what event happened that put you in that first race car?
Oh, the first race car? My cousin, no one in my immediate family raced. So I didn't have the shop in the backyard that I played around. It was just being a kid playing basketball and baseball and riding bicycles. But we always raced, you know, to and from practices, that kind of thing. But my cousin,
competitive spirit.
Yeah, my cousin, Dickie Bales, raced in Charlotte, and they were so close to the NASCAR shops, Holman Moody, and they had a lot of those parts on their cars, and their dirt cars looked like asphalt cars. They had windshields, back glass, and full bodies. But I would go over there when I was going to college. I would go over there on Labor Day weekends and race with him, or go to the races with him.
Well, what class of car, or where did you start?
The very first, I'm probably like everybody else. As soon as I got enough money, I didn't have a way to get it to the racetrack. I didn't have a place to work on it, but I bought my first car, and it was just an old 55 Chevrolet frame with a Nova body on it. And we raced B class at Atomic, which was 283 cubic inch limit, steel bodies, steel wheels.
You know, no matter how good we are, we still have to learn to
Right.
do this stuff. And I think when you stop learning, that's a good time to get out.
Right.
When you know it all, you better be careful. Somebody's about to teach you a lesson.
Where was you at with the first race you run? Where did you run it at?
The very first race that I was ever in the pits at Atomic, I was sitting in a race car. I had never been in the pits.
You started on a fast track.
I started at Atomic. It was the closest track, and it had that 283. And the reason I ran 283 is my cousin in Charlotte had ran 283s. He had got out, and I went over and picked up a pile of old blocks and cranks and pistons, and that's why I ran that motor.
Well, they were a durable motor, and you could ream the fool out of them, and they'd stay together.
But I was unlike today where you have 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids getting in unlimited late models. I was probably the youngest driver at Atomic in B class or A class at that time. And I was 23.
If you can remember this, what did it feel like to you the first time you sat in a race car? You're sitting there waiting, you're lined up, you're waiting for the race to start. What kind of feeling did you have?
I'll tell you this, when I pushed the clutch in, my left leg was quivering to get out of the pits.
At least you're truthful.
Well, I was confident, but I didn't want to make a fool out of myself.
Well, it's the gravity of just being out there with the group that you're in that I guess, you know, I'm sitting here with some of the best there is out there. And
nobody can tell you what to do.
You know, you can have the best of equipment, but when you strap in, it's up to you to make it work.
It was exciting. And
Hey,
I
Dave,
think I finished my first race too, which that was good.
The thing about Dave was he was a crate chasing it. You know, he built some fast cars and made other people fast that really wasn't too fast.
At what point, now I know you built some good stuff, you drove some good stuff, but at what point did you start building chassis?
I raced the car that I bought, for the very end of one season, 76, and raced it all of 77, and decided to build my own car. And did not race it until probably July of 78, but I gathered up every book, and most of them were out of California, you know, the books on building
Right.
race cars. But a lot of them had good tips and pointers about safety and about, you know, triangulation of the bars and stiffening the car up. So I did a lot of study that way.
I think one of those was Steve Smith. That was one of the first chassis books
Right.
that
I
I
had one too.
started making me understand really what does make this thing work. Now, I know at some point in your career, you got hooked up with a Howl.
I did. I was
And
telling
what brought that about?
I was telling Mike, I raced the car that I built. I actually went to Roscoe Smith and bought the cage and got Roscoe to show me how he married the Nova front subframe to the 55 Chevrolet frame rails. Got the measurements, went home, worked on the car, like I said, till June, and was fast. I was just lucky that we hit on something that was really fast, and dropped out of the first 3 races leading the feature race. The first 3 times we went out, once for overheating, we had to drop out, and twice it ran out of gas, and couldn't figure out why it was running out of gas. It was set up for road race, the fuel cell was, so it had 2 pickups, and during the race it would uncover the one on the left, so it was shutting off. And so we got that fixed, and I won, I don't know, 3 or 4 races in a row.
That when you have a car that it handles good enough, drives good enough, that it starts giving you drivetrain some problems, then you know you're headed down the right path with it.
But that car was one of those transitions that racing goes through. A lot of the guys that I raced against had raced Tootle Estes, H.E. Vineyard, Herman Goddard,
All of them are
Buddy
great.
Rogers. They'd raced for 20 years, 25
Clay
years.
Kelly.
Clay.
And they were good.
But they had came out of the straight axle modified cars, you know, into the 55 Chevrolet frames. And we were right there on that change that the Nova or Chevrolet front frame section, the late model, kind of changed the game a little bit. And then we were right on the cusp of jig built cars, you know, manufactured. And that's when that car was not competitive, I quit for a year, ran around with Sofa a little bit, helped him with his tire business up at Atomic, and we went to Howe, and we got the Howe dealership, Dave and I did. And I built the jig and built the cars.
And it was along that era too, where a guy, it started getting to the point you could actually buy something cheaper than you could build it yourself. And then when you crashed it, you could go back, if you needed A-arms and stuff, you could go back and buy those pieces. In a lot of ways, the initial investment was a little bit more maybe, but you could, it controls your costs by being able to repair things.
It wasn't as much work to get a car fixed after you crashed it. You could just go buy off the shelf. It wasn't as much fun because you couldn't get an advantage, because you had the same thing that everyone else had.
And that's really what racing's like today.
Right.
JD Stacy, I know you had some involvement with
I did.
JD Stacy. I've got to hear this story about this because JD had quite a reputation of his own, but how did you get involved with him to start with?
JD Stacy was just one of the most interesting guys you would ever want to be around. Just like you and I are sitting here talking, he was everybody's friend, but he had some business ethics, let's say, that were different from everybody else. JD was a strip miner in Kentucky, but when he really got it, you know, when he burst on the NASCAR scene, he had 7 teams, something like that. JD had gotten in a deal with the government of the Netherlands
Yes.
to import some mining equipment. Well, the mistake they made was they were paying him for everyone that they shipped to the United States. Well, he was just stacking them up in the lower 40 and getting $4 million every time they sent him one. So he just kept ordering.
The character of JD Stacy was quite a character
Oh, God.
all its own.
Oh gosh, yeah, there's some colorful stories about him and Harry Hyde.
Oh, yeah.
Still to this day. When JD bought Kingsport Speedway, released it, and tore the asphalt up, and then he started a little circuit that was Kingsport Speedway, Timminsville, South Carolina, and Cordele, Georgia. And he wanted, for fan attraction, he wanted a female driver, Robin McCall.
I remember her well. In fact, I've got her autograph somewhere.
She's married to Wally Dallenbach.
Yeah.
But Robin was the driver, and JD was paying me to bring a car to the track for her to drive. And so it was money you could count on every week. So.
Well, some of the other drivers share with us that JD had driving for him when you were involved with it.
He actually had gotten out of the racing business. I think NASCAR pretty much.
They had their episode.
Yeah.
Dale
So-
Earnhart at one time actually did.
Right. That's
Joey
before-
Ridley maybe.
That's before JD sold the team to Australian. But he had migrated to the promotional side of it. He had some money in Rodney Combs' car before J.W. Hunt. It was, I think they call him 5-Star Racing, but Rodney drove one of his cars.
I think that is what they called it.
Yeah. But I don't remember any other dirt track cars that he actually had some interest in.
I know as you are around people like JD, there's always some interesting stories, but what is one of your favorite JD Stacy stories that you can think of that comes to mind when you think of JD?
Probably we were at Timminsville, South Carolina, and we were running a companion race with the Darlington NASCAR race. And JD would attract people, Tim Richmond, Mike Alexander, Bobby Allison, those people, David Pearson. I got to meet all those folks because JD knew them and they were kind of attracted to him. But the funniest story is we raced 2 nights, and I went up after the first race to his hotel room to get paid. And I walked in, and they had a full-size bed stacked with cash. And they were sitting there counting the proceeds out, putting money in little piles of where it went. And mine was a real small stack.
I was going to ask where yours fit in with all of this.
It was a small stack, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. He was, like I said, he was a colorful guy.
It's amazing the stories that's out there like that. The people that are the fans that comes to the races, they see the end results and everything that happened the week before, the month before, the year before. But there's the best stories are the ones that you don't see and don't hear about unless you're in a situation like we were in.
Have you got any good Robbie McCall stories? Anybody want to fight her or any trouble with the racetrack?
No, as a matter of fact, the other drivers were very respectful of Robin, and she was getting a lot of attention, probably more attention because of her gender than her driving ability, and other guys could have been jealous because of that, but they were very respectful. But I guess the most colorful story I remember, we were at Kingsport, and she was running really good that night, and we were in the pits on the back straightaway watching. And I turned around and told somebody, I said, man, I think she's getting the hang of it. About that time, she centered the wall coming out of the pits and just destroyed the race car.
Hit an opening? She hit an opening on the wall?
Yeah, where you come out, she hit the
And
opening.
destroyed the car?
Oh, just
And
drove
you had to put it back together?
I had to put a clip on it, yeah.
Well, actually, she was a good driver.
She wasn't bad, was she?
She was really good on asphalt.
She was against a lot of odds out there anyway, because you had the situation where some guys didn't want a woman to succeed at it because it had been a man's sport so long, but now I'm proud it's evolved like it has to some extent now, but you did have guys that really didn't want women to get into their sport. Now they ride Harleys and everything else, so we ain't got nothing left.
Back years ago, like, I know when we first started, the first several years there, I don't even think they let women in the pit,
No,
did they?
Nor under 18.
When me and his dad, Earl, started racing, or when I started racing, Earl had been racing a good while, but women weren't allowed, kids weren't allowed in the pits, and his dad went to the act of Congress because he was his chief mechanic. Although he was a kid, he's been a mechanic forever. He had to go through act of Congress, and this was just in a dirt track to get him in the pits.
They used to have he'd slip me, he had to get in the car, lay down in the car.
It's funny, you know, you think, well, that wasn't that long ago, but it's 45 years ago. That's quite a long time. My wife went to every race with me, and my biggest fan, biggest supporter. But she was the first woman that they ever let into Tazewell Speedway to the pits.
Well, his, let's see, Joanne, BK's wife, she was one of the first ones that started going into the pits too at tracks like Mac Memble, the first old Mac Memble racetrack. She was one of the first ladies to be into that out there, and there was even some controversy at that time for that to happen.
Yeah, we went to Cleveland when Joe Lee was promoting it, and they wouldn't let her in.
That was Joe Lee Johnson.
Yeah, they wouldn't let her in, and she sat in the stands with Joe Lee's wife to watch the race.
Well, Joe Lee's one of our favorite people around here, still will be always.
Quite a story.
Will be.
Quite a story. I still go back and watch the 60
Hey,
World 600.
that's
He won
one of the best.
He won the very first one, didn't he? The very first World 600.
Well, Dave, I know you've seen a lot of controversies and things. What's one of the most controversial things you ever saw at the track that almost caused everybody to get whipped?
Probably we had a couple of folks over the years that we couldn't be on the track at the same time with, but that usually turned out to be just kind of a spat. But the most controversial thing that happened to me was in the Indy race at Atomic. We had started like 22nd, worked our way up to 11th, and needed the money for 11th place, just to be honest with you. And Rodney Combs spun me out twice under caution. First time they put him to the back.
Now, that would get your attention.
First time they put him to the back, the next time they put us both to the back. And I waited on him, and when we went in, coming off the second turn, I drove him into the wall, and I kept him in the wall till I could feel his car hitting the wall, and then got away from him. But and then after the race, we had to deal with that, you know. But that was.
Well, I see you're still here.
I'm still here.
Did y'all have?
Yeah, I had a jackhammer, so
That helps.
things calmed down
Yeah.
pretty quick. And they came to my pit, which that's always pretty much a stand your ground.
Yeah, but that's an
you have to.
advantage when they get to you.
Yeah. I always felt like that was kind of
Right.
same as coming to my garage.
They're
or my
over the
house.
line, you're not.
And if you don't stand up, they'll run you over forever.
But he was building Howe cars too, and whether it was intentional or not, he ruined our day. And he had 2 cars there, and he took 1.5 home.
Well, you know, there was still, I guess always will be, some intentional things done, but a lot of things that happens on the track, when you do look back on it, it ain't the way you feel that day when it happened.
Right.
But a lot of it did just happen.
Right.
And it might could have been prevented, it might not, but it really wasn't intentional. But if you're sitting there, it's an emotional sport anyway, because you've got everything you've got laid out there
Right.
with it. So
Yeah,
we will create some emotion.
We were counting on taking cash home at the end of the day to come back the next week. And, that drives a lot of behavior.
Hey, needing that cash will make you do some things you didn't think you were ever be capable of doing.
Plus your life. I mean, you know, when you strap in a super late model, it's like being on the end of lightning or something. It's unreal.
Well, if you're doing it right, you're gonna be on the edge
Yeah.
every inch of the way.
I'll never forget running at Atomic. It was just things just came at you so fast, you really didn't notice the speed of the car. It was just how fast things happened around you. But we went to Smoky Mountain before they reconfigured it, when it was over a half-mile track. And you ran down those straightaways with holding the wheels straight, which is different in a dirt car, because even at Atomic, you were driving the car down the straightaways
Right.
too. But at Atomic or Smoky Mountain, you go under the flag stand and you're kind of looking for somewhere, where am I gonna let off? And it was pulling the helmet. So you're right. When you get those kind of speeds,
You risk it all.
on the edge.
That's what really got my attention, was the older guys, and even through my time, when you strapped in a Super, you better be ready to lay it all out there.
It's, the speeds are a lot greater than, some people might think they are. I know when radars first came out, man, I'm getting old. But when, radars first came out for law enforcement, I know they brought one to Winchester once, and it was amazing some of the speeds that was being turned right at the end of the straightaway out there. People might think you're running 50 mile an hour, but you're running you can hit close to 100 on a quarter-mile track if it's hooked up real good. You can pretty much stay there all night. Dave, I'd like to ask people, you've been around a long time like I have, but as you see racing today, what do you really think racing needs today that would help it? I know it's going through some changes, it's in sort of a lull right now, and having been around, what do you see that we could help?
All the tracks that we used to run on is closed up, and of course, they're building houses and stuff on, but, I'd like, like bring some tracks back as well. What would you think that would bring them tracks back?
I think we talked about, the progression of things and how things change. I think the biggest thing that has changed around any live sporting event is you can watch everything on YouTube or live, on streaming TV. And I think that's hurt the walk-in crowd, the fannies in the seats, and you gotta have that. I learned that the hard way from Bill Ogle. He told me, I thought I was the show. He said, no. He said, those people up in the stands are show. You're just here to have fun.
Hey, there are a lot of truth in that.
So you got to play to that, getting folks to come that want to turn loose some hard-earned dollars to see a product.
Right.
But, it's kind of show business, isn't it? Really, we're in show business.
We are in the entertainment business.
Cars have to be equal enough that there's some sort of competition, some sort of racing going on.
Well, we've got to reopen a Golden Mountain Speedway, gonna be this coming spring. They hadn't announced their date yet, but they're going to. But they're looking at running a class, Crown Vics, for an affordable class that can get people started in it and see if that's what they want to do with themselves. So they're actually looking at some things like that. Some other tracks are too, but they're looking at getting that started.
I'd really like to see fewer classes, but a lot more cars in each class, so that you put on a lot more racing per event.
3 or 4 cars, it's hard for them to put on the show.
Well, my son yesterday went to Alabama, where the band Alabama's from, Fort Payne. 10 classes on it.
Yeah.
10 classes. I mean, people get tired of sitting there and leave, and then when they leave, you've lost them, because most of the time they're not coming back.
The last thing they see is what they're gonna remember, and that's gonna dictate where they come back and not a lot of times. Well, Dave, I gotta thank you for being here, and I want you to come back again, because we didn't get it anywhere. We just barely scraped the surface of these stories, and I want to talk to you about some chassis and a lot of things that guys out there are interested in. But on behalf of the Northfield Vineyard, I thank you for watching us. Please subscribe to us and like us and subscribe. That's what, and it don't cost you anything, folks. That's what keeps us alive and going. And the little TV station, WATE Channel 6 in McMinnville, they're a big supporter of this. And I'll say again, the Northfield Vineyard, if it wasn't for them, we probably couldn't make this work, because they're always supporters of us. and they're just great people to do business with. And when you have an event, consider them, look at them. You might be surprised how cheap you could put on a first-class event just at the Northville Vineyard. So with that, thank you again, like and subscribe to us.